Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello and welcome to week 8 of the NPTEL MOOCs course on economic growth and development. This is the concluding week of this course. We have in this course moved far in being able to discuss that poverty is no longer measured based on a single dimension, of income, and that there is a lot of focus on multidimensional measures of poverty. And as a part of the last 2 weeks of this course, we have been focusing a lot on other indices of human development, which also goes a long way in telling us what are the different levels of achievements and deprivations that people have had in different parts of the world. And as a part of these issues on measuring development and poverty, we have looked at, along with the Human Development Index, we have also looked at the measurement of deprivations based on the Human Poverty Index, Gender Development Index, Gender Empowerment Measure, and so on. In this class, we will look at one of the most recent indices of human development, which is being taken very seriously as far as policy implementation is concerned, and that is referred to as the Multidimensional Poverty Index. And international thinking has revolved around this thought of the thought that poverty has multiple dimensions, and therefore that needs to be a focus on multiple deprivations that people face on a daily basis. There is also an increasing attention as far as the conception of poverty is concerned. There is a lot of discussion surrounding the fact that the way people view poverty or the way people view how they are poor differs from how the policymakers view how they are poor. And based upon this, the United Nations Development Programme has had a number of pioneering works surrounding the issue of measurement of multidimensional poverty. Let us begin in this class with a small video clip on how people's conception of poverty is very different from the way policymakers or people working from the comforts of their office spaces view poverty, and then we will move on with the discussion on the measurement of multidimensional poverty index.
What is poverty? We've been studying it for more than a century, thousands of documents, conferences, and financial resources, and yet we all know that poverty is more than the lack of income. What are the deprivations apart from income that might cause a person to be poor? Many of the answers to this question have been formulated from the comfort of our offices. An alternative approach, however, is to define the dimensions of poverty by asking the people who are poor. In other words, through a participatory process where poverty is defined from the protagonist's perspectives.
Ya dejar de comer frijoles y ver, pero aquí a veces se come y a veces no.
Días uno come, días no come.
Y hay veces que uno ya no alcanza para uno, pues ya uno ya se queda solo con las ganas de comer, no come.
Él, cuando puedo, le doy su vasito de leche, le doy un cirulito, cuando hay, pero cuando no hay, ni modo, le tocó café si hay, y si no, pues agüita.
Para definir la pobreza, primeramente, yo diría que lo primero y lo básico es donde estamos, donde vivimos, que es el propio.
Bien limitados a 10 metros cuadrados y ahí estamos. Y 10 metros cuadrados simplemente sirve para una vivienda, e incluso hasta para que jueguen nuestros hijos adentro de la casa fuera, porque ¿de dónde pasa?
Se mete la pero ¿qué? Mira, ahí, están tache blanco.
Y poquito hoyo se mete, pero se llena la laguna, mira, allá adentro se mete también.
Nada, nada, porque como aquí no hay, si uno va, lo más que sale aquí mismo. Aquí mismo uno sale, sí, al monte, trae un su pala, trae leña, esa es la diversión de las personas aquí.
Quisiera salir con mi familia todos los fines de semana, pero imagínense, si el dinero solo alcanza para darle el estudio, para la comida y tal vez para comprar una ropita.
¿Por qué no se encuentra empleo usted? No se encuentra empleo.
Por no tener donde trabajar, pues, especialmente. Porque hay empleo, hay progreso.
También hay gente que no aguanta trabajo por falta de estudios.
Es que ya estamos perdidos. No hay fuerza para trabajar.
La gente aquí cuando va al hospital es porque o la llevan de emergencia, no aguantó. De lo contrario hay bastante así dolores o golpes que así en la casa no se visita ninguna clínica ni nada. ¿Por qué? Porque hay bastantes limitantes. Digamos un ejemplo, ver una persona aquí se lastima algo, ¿verdad? A veces ni siquiera puede pasar, tiene para agarrar el bus y ir a una clínica, pues, aunque no le vayan a cobrar nada, ¿verdad?
Mira, componen por orden de Dios tan grande.
Con la situación que está, los empleados, delincuentes que están. Por eso. Porque antes no era así. Era bien tranquilo. Salía uno a la medianoche. ¿Y ahora qué? Imagínate. Ya a las 5, a las 4 está uno echado ya. Ya no sale mucho a la calle. A la voluntad de Dios. Imagínate. Ahí solo Dios nos cuida a uno aquí. Es duro. No duerme. No duerme nada uno. Imagínate.
Mire que yo tan pobre era que yo jalaba agua, jalaba cargas de tomate, jalaba leña, lavaba ajeno para ganarme los cuadernos de mis hijos, porque eran 7. Entonces les di solo hasta, yo platiqué con ellos y les dije, hijo, yo ya no puedo más, hijo, yo soy muy pobre, hijo, yo le voy a dar hasta 9, y hasta 9 no le di a todo. Ya no pude más.
Esa para mí es tremendo. Uno se acuesta y duerme pensando qué va a comer mañana, qué es lo que va a hacer mañana. Y así vive uno. Eso nunca se le va a terminar a uno. ¿Sí? Nunca se le va a terminar. Si uno no se hace viejo por los años, sino por lo que uno vive, ¿verdad?
seen in this video, there are people, some interviews have been carried out among different people of different age groups in El Salvador. And one of the things that is coming out very clearly is the amount of deprivations that people face on a daily basis. So while on the one hand, a good conception of development or successful development index is able to capture the achievements that people have acquired or the countries have acquired over a period of time, it is equally important to look at the extent of deprivations and the degree of deprivations that people face in their daily lives. And that is what the concept of or the measure of multidimensional poverty index sets out to measure. Towards the end of the video, you saw some of the dimensions that have been taken into consideration based upon the actual conceptions of poverty as people themselves have spoken about for the construction of the multidimensional poverty index as carried out in El Salvador. Now in this class, there are different measures of multidimensional poverty index, and there are two generic measures that you see that you will come across in reports and the literature on development. One is the multidimensional poverty index as calculated based upon the global human development reports, particularly when it came out in 2011. And another measure of MPI you will see in the context of different countries or at different sub-regional levels or sub-national levels. Now, the MPI, the measure of MPI itself has over a period of time become very versatile because it is flexible with regard to the number of dimensions and the number of indicators that can be taken to suit the regional or the sub-regional needs. So, for example, if we are trying to calculate MPI at a country level so that we can carry out global comparisons or country comparisons at the global level, then a certain specific set of indicators need to be taken such that data is available for those specific indicators for all the countries that we are taking for calculations of the MPI. But suppose we want to carry out MPI at a sub-regional level, sub-national level, let's say for the state of Uttar Pradesh or Bihar or Assam or Odisha in the country in India, then depending upon the data available at the sub-regional level or the sub-national level, usually the amount of data that is available at a more disaggregated level increases, because as a sample size increases, the amount of data that can be collected at the sub-national levels increases. So depending upon the data that is available, different MPIs can be calculated to suit the needs at the regional level, and that helps policy making ultimately. However, in this class, we will mostly be concerned with the MPI that is calculated at the global level, at the country level taken up by the HDR. So, based upon what we have just learned, there are again three dimensions of poverty that the HDR considers. The health, education and living standard dimensions, and there are 10 indicators as compared to the human poverty index or the human development index that we have studied in the previous classes. You will see that the number of indicators increase, and these indicators have been shortlisted by the UNDP after a lot of consultation with different experts from each of these dimensions. So, there are experts who have been working on health issues for a long period of time, who've been working on education issues, on income issues, and with a lot of consultations with the experts working on each of these dimensions, these indicators have been shortlisted by the UNDP. So, there is a lot of justification with regard to how much can be calculated, how sensitive these indicators are to be able to measure acute poverty. Another thing to keep in mind based upon the indicators that you see that are showing on your slide is that multidimensional poverty also measures what is called acute poverty. It measures acute poverty. So, this is one of the things that we try to measure when we are in poverty studies or in income related studies, where we are looking at levels of deprivation or the degree of deprivation among people. So, multidimensional poverty index is a tool for measuring acute poverty. So, there are multiple dimensions that are being taken into consideration to assess people's deprivations. So, the health dimension is measured by nutrition and child mortality. Education dimension is measured by years of schooling and school attendance. Living standard is measured by cooking fuel, improved sanitation, safe drinking water, electricity, flooring and assets. So these are the indicators for which data are collected at the level of the countries. For example, in 2011 HDR, 109 countries participated in the calculation of MPI. So which means for all those 109 countries, data was collected based upon all of these 10 indicators, and then following a suitable methodology, which we will see presently, the MPI was calculated. Now, one of the questions that needs answer, although many of these questions have already been answered as we have progressed in this course, is that why does one use a multidimensional approach to poverty? One reason is, of course, that it is measuring acute poverty, because income alone can miss a lot of things, and we have seen that in the last few classes, how income alone does not have any straightforward relationship with human development issues or human development indicators. For example, in India, we know that economic growth in India over the period of last 30 years or so has been unprecedented. Economic growth has risen like never before, but at the same time the number of malnourished children has also risen. Malnourishment rates also show a very high rise. In fact, the hunger index came up just a few days back, and based upon the hunger index, you will see that India's rank has worsened in the global hunger index. So while economic growth has gone up or has risen unprecedentedly, the sensitive indicators of human development also does not show a very good performance. So income alone can miss a lot of things, and therefore the need to measure multidimensionally what are the different deprivations that people face. Another reason is that the video clipping that we just saw in the beginning of this class, poor people themselves describe their experiences of poverty as multidimensional. They never focus only on lack of incomes. So poor people are focusing more on the participatory exercises that international organizations have had reveal that poor people describe ill-being to include poor health, poor education, poor work conditions, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of focus on inadequate sanitation, or although children within the households may have had some exposure to primary schooling, secondary schooling, there is a lack of resources to be able to access higher education and so on. So people's conception about how they are poor, whether it is absolute poverty or relative poverty, is very different, and there needs to be a focus on people's conception of how they are defining themselves as poor as far as policy making is concerned. The third reason why multidimensionality approach is important is that the more policy relevant information that is available on poverty, the equipped policy makers will be to reduce it. So for example, if I continue with the example of India, when I said that economic growth has been increasing, but the India's performance in terms of the global hunger index has also been worsening. Probably if we have more measures with regard to what are the dimensions in which deprivations are high, if deprivations are high in terms of child nutrition or women's morbidity issues, then probably health policy making should be focusing more on child nutrition and so on. So therefore, for relevant policy making, it is important that we focus on these multidimensional indicators. Fourthly, some methods for multidimensional measurement are available, and today if you look, I would request all of you to look at the Oxford Poverty Human Development Initiative, which has come up with the Alkire-Foster method, and which is being very widely used with different kinds of cutoff at the subnational levels, at the regional levels, and that is a very good starting point to be able to carry out disaggregated analysis with regard to multidimensional poverty. So that justifies why use a multidimensional approach. Now let us look at the calculation that has been carried out of MPI based upon the human development reports, the global human development reports. Like the previous indices, let us first look at the steps that are involved for calculations of the MPI. First, we have seen that there are 10 indicators and 3 dimensions. Here, let us first look at the dimension of education here. The dimension of education includes 2 indicators, school attainment and school attendance. And here for calculation of multidimensional poverty, we are looking at the head count ratio of persons who are deprived, as well as the intensity of people who have been deprived of the human development achievements. So each person is assigned a deprivation score according to his or her household's deprivations in each of the 10 components, and maximum deprivation score is 100% with each dimension equally weighted. Thus the maximum deprivation score in each dimension is 33.3%. The education and health dimensions have 2 indicators. So each indicator is worth half 33.2 or 16.7%. Standard of living dimension has 6 indicators. So each indicator is worth 33.3 by 6 or 5.6%. Let us look at this calculation with the help of a hypothetical example. But before that, let us first look at what do these indicators mean. Now, remember, we are looking at deprivations here. So, school attainment is being measured as when no household member has completed at least 6 years of schooling. So, we are not looking at achievements here, but we are looking at deprivations. So, if no household member, so if there is a household comprising of 5 members, and if none of the household members have completed at least 6 years of schooling, then we will consider that as a deprivation for that household. Similarly, for school attendance, a school age child up to grade 8 but who is not attending school. So that's the second indicator which is also measuring deprivation. For the health dimension, the indicators are nutrition and child mortality. So for nutrition, the deprivation is that a household member for whom there is nutrition information is malnourished as measured by the body mass index for adults and by the height for age Z score calculated based on World Health Organization standards for children under age 5. So for nutrition, the data is collected based upon survey, household survey from women and children within the households. You may ask why the data is collected only from adult women and children. Literature has shown us and empirical studies have shown us that a household's health can be well assessed, very well assessed based upon the health of the women and the children within the family, because they are considered to be the most vulnerable within a family. Therefore, for nutrition indicator, the BMI for women are collected, and the height for age is collected for children, and the height for age basically tells us the degree of stunting among children, and stunting is one of the most important indicators that tell us how much nutrition is being received by children. So nutrition below the age of 5, if they do not receive enough nutrition for their age appropriate required for nutrition, then they are at a very high risk of being facing stunting. So stunting is one of the important indicators here. Now at this point, let me also mention to you that the MPI, unlike the Human Development Index or other Gender Development Index and the Human Poverty Index, is entirely based upon survey data. So special surveys have been carried out, and based upon those surveys, the data has been collected at the household level, which is then being used for calculations of the multidimensional poverty index. The second indicator of health, called child mortality, that basically says if a child has died in the household within the 5 years prior to the date of the survey. So that measures the child mortality indicator. Standard of living includes electricity, drinking water. Electricity, if there are households that do not have access to electricity, then that's a deprivation. Not having access to clean drinking water, or having access to clean drinking water through a source that is located at least 30 minutes away or more by walking, which means that members within the family spend a lot of time fetching water for their daily needs. So that is also considered to be a deprivation. Sanitation, not having access to improved sanitation facilities or having access to shared improved sanitation facilities. Cooking fuel, that uses dirty cooking fuel, dung, wood or charcoal. Having a home with dirt, sand or dung floor. And assets, that's also one of the important indicators for standard of living, and that includes a number of sub-indicators. Not having at least one asset related to access to information such as radio, television or telephone, or having at least one asset related to information but not having at least one asset related to mobility. Bike, motorbike, car, truck, animal cart or motorboat, or at least one asset related to livelihood. refrigerator, arable land or livestock. So there are proxies for assets deprivation among the household. So all three together form the indices: education, health and standard of living. Under education, school attainment and attendance. Under health, nutrition and child mortality. And under standard of living, no access to electricity, no or restricted access to drinking water, no or restricted access to sanitation, no access to clean cooking fuels, not having an appropriate housing condition, and restricted access to assets that can help with accessing information or mobility or related to livelihood choices. So then how do we calculate MPI? The first step is actually to be able to identify what are the data sources, which we have already done, the indicators and the data sources. Then the headcount ratio is first calculated. This headcount ratio is basically a proportion of the multidimensional poor in this population given by this formula H is equal to Q by N, where H is the headcount ratio, Q is the number of people who are multidimensionally poor, and N is the total population. So we are basically doing a head count of how many people within a given population are multidimensionally poor given the indicators that we have just considered. And then the intensity of poverty, or A, is calculated, which reflects the proportion of the weighted component indicators in which on average poor people are deprived. You've seen that there is a certain weightage given to calculate the amount of deprivations. So based upon an appropriate weighting formula, we calculate what is the intensity of poverty, how many people are multidimensionally poor. And then for poor households only, the deprivation scores are summed and divided by the total number of poor people. So if you see here, Q is the total number of poor people and N is the total population. So for intensity of poverty, the indicators on which the individuals are multidimensionally poor is summed up and then divided by the total number of poor people. So here CI is the deprivation score that the ith poor person experiences, and the deprivation score CI of the ith person can be expressed as the sum of the weights associated with each indicator J. So the J being the 10 indicators that we have just discussed under the education, health and standard of living dimensions. And then the deprivation indicators are all added up, and then the MPI value is basically the product of headcount ratio H multiplied by the intensity of poverty as calculated by A. So let us look at an illustration. This is a hypothetical example. Here if you see, we have taken 4 households, 1, 2, 3 and 4. These are the 4 households for whom we are calculating multidimensional poverty. The first row here mentions the household size or the number of members in each of these households. So household 1 has 4 members. Household 2 has 7 members, 3 has 5 members and 4 has 4 members. And then these are all of the indicators that we have just discussed. These are the dimensions: education, health and living conditions. Now let us look at the indicators. We have already seen that depending upon the number of indicators within each dimension, the deprivation is calculated by providing a weight of 33.3 divided by 2. So here each indicator in education gets a weight of 16.7%, in health 16.7% because there are 2 indicators, and under living conditions because there are 6 indicators, they receive a weight of 5.6%. So let us look at education here. For the indicator no one has completed 6 years of schooling, there are no members in household number 1 among the 4 who qualify with this criteria. So all the members in household number 1, all the 4 members of household number 1 have completed 6 years of schooling. Of the 7 members in household number 2, there is 1 member who has not completed 6 years of schooling, and therefore this household is facing a deprivation. In household number 3, all the 5 members have completed 6 years of schooling. So deprivation count score here is 0. For household number 4, 1 member of the household has not completed 6 years of schooling, and therefore there is the deprivation score here is 1. Similarly, for at least 1 school age child not enrolled in school, there are none in household 1, there is 1 in household 2, none in household 3 and none in household number 4. For the health dimension, at least 1 member is malnourished There are no members in household number 1 who are malnourished, 1 and 2 and 4, but there is one member in household number 3 that is malnourished. Similarly, one or more children who have died in the last 5 years prior to the date of survey. Household numbers 1, 2 and 4 have experienced at least one death, and therefore they are facing some sort of a deprivation. They are given a score of 1 each. Household number 3 faces no deprivation on this count. Similarly, for living conditions, no electricity, households number 2, 3 and 4 are facing deprivation. No access to clean drinking water, household number 3 faces a deprivation. No access to adequate sanitation, 2 and 3. House has dirt flow, none of the households face that deprivation, so all of them get a 0. Households using dirty cooking fuel, all of them face a deprivation, which means none of them have access to clean cooking fuels. And households having no access to information or assets related to mobility and livelihood, households 2 and 4 are facing deprivation. So, based upon these deprivation scores, what do we then do? Household deprivation score is then calculated. So, they are based upon the weights, which means that for education indicator, the weight is 16.7. So, this is 16.7 into 0, 0. This is 16.7%, this is 0 and this is 16.7%. So, accordingly the weights are multiplied with the deprivation scores, and then the final scores are just added up to get a score such as this: 22.2%, 72.2, 38.9 and 50. Now, since the deprivation score is 33.3%, so in the final addition, all those households who have a score of less than 33.3% are not considered to be deprived, whereas all those households that have a score above 33.3% are considered to have faced deprivations, and therefore they are multidimensionally poor. So, in this final analysis here, households number 2, 3 and 4 are multidimensionally poor. The deprivation scores are way higher than 33.3%. So, among them the household number 3 is relatively multidimensionally poor compared to 2 and 4, but household number 1 has fewer deprivations than households numbers 2, 3 and 4. So, 1 indicates deprivation in this indicator and 0 indicates non-deprivation. So, this is a repetition of how the deprivations have been calculated. For household 1, the deprivations are 22.2, household 2 72.2, similarly for household 3 38.9 and 50.9, and then based upon this the head count ratio is calculated. Head count ratio is the number of people who are multidimensionally poor. So, in this case you see that this household number 1 is not multidimensionally poor. Therefore, here the total population is 7, 9, 10, and the number of people who are multidimensionally poor is 2 plus 3 is 7 plus 5 plus 6, whereas the total for plus 4. So, here if you see the head count ratio is 0 plus 7 plus 5 plus 4. These are the number of members in the household who are multidimensionally poor. So, in household number 1, 0, there are none of the members are considered to be deprived. So, the value received here is 0 plus 7 plus 5 plus 4. So, which means, and the value is 0.8, which means that 80% of people in this hypothetical example live in poor households, and that is the head count ratio. Similarly, the intensity of poverty is measured. The intensity of poverty is given by the number of members in each of the household multiplied by the the percentage of deprivation that they are facing. So, here 7 into 72.2. So, this is the deprivation that the household has faced, and these are the number of household members in that family. Household number 2, household number 3, 5 members, deprivation 38.9. Household number 4 is number of 4 members and deprivation 50. So, that is to measure what is the amount of deprivation faced by the total number of people. So, 56.3 is the value. This is the intensity of poverty. This is the head count ratio of poverty. So, that means that the average poor person is deprived in 56.3% of the weighted indicators, and therefore, the MPI is then calculated by multiplying the head count ratio of poverty by the intensity of poverty, which is given by 0.450. So what does this exercise tell us? This exercise tells us that given the counts on which, or given the indicators on which the households are multidimensionally poor, a deprivation index can be calculated, which in this case is the multidimensional poverty index, and then we can also assess which of those dimensions contribute more to more to the households being multidimensionally poor, and that is where policy making comes in, or policy focus comes in. So this is how the contributions of deprivations can be calculated. So of each, the contribution of each dimension to multidimensional poverty, this is the contribution of health to multidimensional poverty. So in this hypothetical example, let's say 33.3% of the households being multidimensionally poor is because of deprivations in education, 29.6% is because of health, and for living conditions 37.1% is because of living conditions. So these calculations can be useful for revealing a country's deprivation structure and then help with policy targeting. So now after the MPI is calculated for different countries in the HDR, different groupings are carried out based upon the weighted indicators. A cutoff of 33.3%, which is equal to 1/3 of the weighted indicators, is used to distinguish between the poor and non-poor. So if the deprivation score is 33%, 33.3% or higher, that household and everyone in it is multidimensionally poor. Households with a deprivation score of 20% or higher but less than 33.3% are near multidimensional poverty. So in this previous example, this household which has a deprivation score of more than 20% but less than 33.3%, this is a household which is near multidimensional poverty but not exactly multidimensionally poor. And households with a deprivation score of 50% or higher are considered to be severely multidimensionally poor. And these groupings of countries carried out based upon multidimensional poverty can of course go a long way in solving policy issues at the respective country levels. This is the multidimensional poverty index. It was calculated. This is just an example that I have put here for Afghanistan, Ethiopia, Bangladesh, China and India, all developing countries. So this is the multidimensional poverty index that was calculated for different years. These are the head counts of poverty. So in India, 55.3% of people, based upon the calculations carried out, were multidimensionally poor. And if you look at the head count ratio of poverty based upon income criteria, you will see that it is much higher than that. If you look at the all India level, the income poverty shows that the ratio is about 28 or 29%. So if somebody says what is the poverty rate for India, the official headcount ratio of poverty based upon income criteria is that about 27 or 28% of people in India are poor. But if you look at the multidimensional poverty measure, almost double, close to double of that is considered to be multidimensionally poor, which are facing, these are the households who are facing deprivations on a daily basis. So 55.3% is the head count, and intensity of deprivation tells us that it is 51.1. And in India, population near multidimensional poverty is 18.2 and population in severe multidimensional poverty is 27.8. And if all of these are added, you would see that proportion of population in India, let's say, that are multidimensionally poor are way above 50% or 60%, which is nowhere near to what we see in case of income poverty calculations, shown to be on an average 27 to 28%, which means that also that and this has serious policy implications, because poverty measures and how poverty is calculated has a lot of significance with respect to the welfare measures carried out in the country and the welfare benefits received by the people within this country. So if official policy says that only 27% are poor, then probably welfare policies will be such designed that only 27% of the poor receive the benefits. However, there will be about 30% in the population, close to 30% in the population who are left out of these policy orbits because they have not been counted as being poor or being deprived in certain indicators. So that's the significance of looking at different measures. Now these are some of the key findings of the latest global MPI which was calculated in 2017. I have put them together to provide more emphasis on what these figures can tell us, what is the significance of these figures. The key findings are as follows. The global MPI of 2017 showed us that a total of 1.45 billion people from 103 countries are multidimensionally poor, considering 2013 population, and 26% of the people living in these countries. 48% of poor people live in South Asia and 36% in Sub-Saharan Africa. So, South Asia, which includes India, Bangladesh and the like, includes about 48% of multidimensionally poor people. Most MPI poor people, about 72%, live in middle income countries. So again, this is also a significant finding here, because when we talk about middle income countries, if you remember the World Bank income classification that I had done in the earlier classes based upon the WDI data, you would see that as income rises, one of the conclusions drawn is that people have more access to basic services and the like. But if you calculate multidimensional poverty, you will see that 72% live in middle income countries. So although their income levels are much higher than the low income countries or the low middle income countries and the like, but people who are facing multidimensionally poor conditions are also very high. Half of the multidimensionally poor are children in the age of 0 to 7, 48%. This is also a very significant finding, which means that children of this world are poorer than the rest. So children do not have access to basic services. Like the implications of this is also very important, because if children in their growing age do not receive some of the basic amenities of life, that shows up in terms of worsening work conditions and work performances when they grow up. So if they do not have access to education, they do not have access to good sanitation facilities, electricity, drinking water and so on, then the life chances of children moving into productive age groups is also worsening. So therefore this finding is important. 48% of the children are multidimensionally poor. Nearly half of all MPI poor people are destitute. That means they experience extreme deprivations like severe malnutrition in at least 1/3 of the dimensions. In Uganda, 22% of people live in a household where at least one person experiences a severe disability. This is an important finding. Poverty in these households is higher. 77% of people are poor versus 69% in other households. So households which has disabled persons face much poorer conditions, much less life choices, survival choices than those in which there are quote unquote able-bodied individuals. The MPI and its indicators are disaggregated by 988 subnational regions in 78 countries, and the poorest regions are Chad, Burkina Faso, Niger, Ethiopia, South Sudan, Nigeria, Uganda and Afghanistan. Inside Afghanistan, poverty rates vary from 25% in Kabul to 95% in Uruzgan, which shows that there is a lot of inequality within Afghanistan and number of countries in the sub-Saharan African region. So these are the key findings of global MPI as came out in 2017. Now, I will end today's class with a very brief and short discussion about what is called the Millennium Development Goals and the Sustainable Development Goals. And there has been some sort of a political shift when we moved from Millennium Development Goals to Sustainable Development Goals. Let us have a look at what are MDGs and what are SDGs, and what does this movement from MDGs to SDGs mean. So MDGs started in the form of a Millennium Declaration in 2000 when 189 nations came together to make a promise to free people from extreme poverty and multiple deprivations. And this is important in the context of multidimensional poverty that we are studying. And this pledge became the 8 Millennium Development Goals to be achieved by 2015. This pledge was taken in 2000, and the pledge was that by 2015 certain goals should have been achieved. And in September 2010, the world recommitted itself to accelerate progress towards these goals. So they are referred to as the Millennium Development Goals. They were adopted at the largest ever gathering of heads of state, committed countries, rich and poor, to doing all they can to eradicate poverty, promote human dignity, equality and achieve peace, democracy and environmental sustainability. And the Millennium Development Goals are as follows. These are the goals that were considered. There were 8 Millennium Development Goals. These Millennium Development Goals were based upon the study of poverty and development carried out by the United Nations over a period of 20 odd years. The goals were first goal was eradicate extreme poverty and hunger, and the targets were fixed for each goal. The targets in this case was that poverty should be halved between 1990 and 2015. Proportion of people whose income is less than $1 a day. Often in this literature, you will come across this number of $1 a day. How many people live below a poverty line of $1 a day? And therefore, the target was to halve the number of people between 1990 and 2015. Proportion of people whose income is less than $1 a day. Half between 1990 and 2015, the proportion of people who suffer from hunger. The second goal was achieving universal primary education, and the target was to ensure that by 2015, children everywhere, girls and boys, should be able to complete a full course of primary schooling. So that's in fact, this is one of the criticisms of the Millennium Development Goals also, that instead of Millennium Development Goals, they were being touted as Minimum Development Goals, because the focus here is entirely on the poverty of the developing countries. So the goal of achieving universal primary education hardly applies to the industrial advanced countries of the world. So in that sense, the MDGs were more focused on the poverty of the developing countries. The third goal was promote gender equality and empower women, and the target here was to eliminate gender disparity in primary and secondary education, preferably by 2005, and in all levels of education no later than 2015. So the focus here was to ensure that enrollments among boys and girls increase both in primary and secondary schooling, and the bridge and to bridge the inequality in enrollments. And this is something that has increased over a period of time. If you look at the developing countries' education statistics, you will see that the number of girl children and number of enrollments of girls and boys are more or less equal as far as primary and secondary schooling is concerned. However, the dropout rates are much higher beyond the secondary schooling age group. Also within secondary schooling, dropout rates are very high, which is also a big challenge and one of the criticisms of posing such a goal. The fourth one was to reduce child mortality, and the target was to reduce it by 2/3 between 1990 and 2015, the under 5 mortality rate. And as far as global aid for reducing child mortality is concerned, this is one of the biggest successes of the Millennium Development Goals, that child mortality has reduced to a large extent. Improving maternal health, the target was to reduce it by 3/4 between 1990 and 2015. Combat HIV, AIDS, malaria and other diseases, to target was to have them halted by 2015 and begun to reverse the spread of HIV, AIDS, and halted by 2015 malaria and begun to reverse the incidence of malaria. Number 7 was to ensure environmental stability, sustainability, and the targets were to integrate the principles of sustainable development into country policies and programs and reverse the loss of environmental resources, sustainable access to safe drinking water by 2015, and significant improvement in the lives of slum dwellers by 2020. And the final one was developing a global partnership for development. The target was to develop a non-discriminatory trading and financial system. There were a lot of criticisms of the Millennium Development Goals, as I have just pointed out, because the focus was primarily on the poverty of the developing countries, and the inequalities or the iniquities existing within the developed countries was not discussed or were not considered as part of the Millennium Development Goals. And there were also issues raised by human rights activists saying that human rights issues were not integrated within the Millennium Development Goals. And therefore, in 2015, a new set of agenda were worked out, which were referred to as the Sustainable Development Goals. And so, the Sustainable Development Goals have completely replaced the Millennium Development Goals. And one of the focus areas of the SDGs is that it is not focusing only on the poverty of the developing countries, but also on the inequalities existing in the developed countries of the world. So the SDGs came into effect in January 2016. They were worked out in 2015 and they will continue to guide all UNDP policy and funding till 2030. And UNDP is uniquely placed to help implement these goals. The SDGs are otherwise also known as the global goals now. because it considers both the developed and the developing countries, and as a universal call to action to end poverty. There are 17 SDGs, and they are, it is said that they are built on the successes of the Millennium Development Goals, and it also includes many new areas which were not covered in the MDGs, such as climate change, economic inequality, innovation, sustainable consumption, peace and justice, among other priorities. And there is a greater focus on integrating the SDGs into the national development plans and policies, so much so that there is a lot of discussion with regard to SDGs as far as the national plans and policies are concerned today. So what were the goals? The first goal is no poverty, end poverty in all its forms everywhere. Second is to zero hunger or end hunger, achieve food security and improve nutrition. Third is good health and well-being. Fourth is quality education. So unlike the MDGs, where the focus was only on increasing enrollments in primary and secondary schooling, here the goal is to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promoting lifelong learning opportunities for all, which means the focus can also be on higher education, technical education and so on. Goal 5 was achieving gender equality and empowering women and girls. Goal 6 was clean water and sanitation, ensuring availability and sustainable management of water. 7 on clean energy, 8 on decent work and economic growth, which was not focused in the MDGs. Goal 9 is on industry, innovation and infrastructure. Goal 10 was on reducing inequalities. Now this is something which is being identified and emphasized upon in a big manner now. Because while economic growth has risen, we have seen that how in the 1990s and the 2000s inequalities have risen. So there is now an active emphasis and a focus on shifting attention towards reducing inequalities within countries. Goal 11 was sustainable cities and communities. 12 responsible consumption and production patterns, which is also related to sustainability. 13 on climate action. 14 was on life below water, so which means the focus on environmental ecosystems, the protecting life on land as well as water. That was goal number 15. 16 on promoting peace, justice and strong institutions, and 17 on partnerships for the goals, which means that for being able to successfully carry out all of these goals, there has to be partnerships between different institutions and strong stakeholder networks so that these goals can be made successful. So what was the reason for the shift from MDGs to SDGs? They differ from the SDGs differ from MDG in purpose, concept and politics. The MDGs were mostly a north-south aid agenda, and the goals and targets such as universal primary education, as I have just said, were mostly relevant for the developing countries and were sometimes labeled as minimum development goals than Millennium Development Goals. But SDGs are a global agenda for sustainable development, and they have universal goals that set targets for all kinds of countries. Second is that MDGs focused on poverty, understood as meeting basic needs. This was a narrow conception of development. For decades, development had focused on enlarging productive capacity of economies. So SDGs are about sustainable development, and they incorporate ending poverty as a core objective. But the 17 goals and the targets that have been set out, they set out a broader agenda that includes environmental, social and economic sustainability. So that's a more comprehensive and a broader definition than given by the Millennium Development Goals. Thirdly, the MDGs were drafted by technocrats who undertook limited consultations with other sources of knowledge and expertise, whereas the SDGs were drafted based upon various discussions, exhaustive discussions based upon different kinds of scholars and practitioners in the field of development, including the UN Office of the UN Commissioner for Human Rights, who have consistently criticized the MDGs as not adequately aligned with human rights standards and principles, especially equality, participation, non-discrimination and transparency. So the MDGs were goals, not an agenda, and picked out only the numeric goals in the conference agendas of the 1990s. So a number of conferences that were carried out by the UN in the 1990s, they were considered to be only numeric goals rather than being an agenda in itself. So why SDGs? They are more broader and they are more transformative in their agenda. Formulation of SDGs was consciously set up as a process of political negotiation among states. Proposals were invited by intergovernmental bodies, open working groups of UN General Assembly, They formulated SDGs through a process of intense diplomatic negotiations and multi-stakeholder debates. So in that sense, the process structured dialogue with major groups convened to represent the interest of specific social groups, amongst which was women. So SDGs address many more aspects of these complex realities of women's lives and therefore represent a considerable advance on the MDGs. However, there are certain limitations of SDGs that are being highlighted, that there is a risk that most transformative goals and targets would be neglected in implementation through selectivity, simplification and national adaptation. So in this class, we began discussing multidimensional poverty. What is the significance of looking at multidimensional poverty? How assessing deprivations is equally important as assessing achievements, and how assessing deprivations can give us a sense of the intensity of poverty in different regions of the world, and also how it can inform policy making as to how better policies can be made with regard to addressing deprivations, rather than rejoicing in the achievements that countries have achieved over a period of time. Now, based on the multidimensional poverty index and the illustration that we saw with regard to how the multidimensional poverty index is calculated, we also get a notion of how flexible the indicators of multidimensional poverty indices are, and how it can be well suited to the needs of regional levels or subnational levels, where different kinds of MPIs can be constructed with different cutoffs given to different indicators depending upon the level of development that a certain region is in. We also looked at the MDGs and the SDGs, how the MDGs and the SDGs, how there is a shift from MDGs to SDGs, and how the SDGs have become a more broader and a transformative agenda unlike the MDGs. And we very briefly looked at some of the political concerns with regard to the shift from the MDGs to the SDGs. In the next class, we will look at gender mainstreaming and how gender mainstreaming came to be, and how that is an important focus as far as development concerns are concerned in the recent times. And in this context, we will also look at the gender inequality index, which was calculated by the UNDP, and what are the implications of looking at gender inequality index, what does it inform us. And that will be the last lecture of this course, followed by a summary lecture which will end the course. See you in the next class. Thank you.